Hi there. I have a weird story. Have you ever heard of an NPC? An NPC, if you haven't heard of it, is an acronym for non-player character. And it's like if you're familiar with playing video games where there's social situations or urban situations or whatever, where you've got like characters that are like drones. They don't have personalities. You don't interact with them. So when people say that they meet an NPC in real life, they're usually referring to somebody with very little personality. But I a few weeks ago, DJ'd a wedding for an NPC couple. I'm convinced of it. And the guests, 99% of them that I met, anyways, were the same. Now, I'm going a little bit scripted here so I don't get off track, as I often do. But it was a wedding in a nearby town. I'm not going to say who it was for or where it was or when it was exactly. Those aren't important details. But I showed up around 1 o'clock for a 3 p.m. ceremony. And I was to set up outdoors for the ceremony and the cocktail reception, and then reset up inside. And all the while I was out there, I set up early. There's a few people milling about. And so I was sort of mucking around on my phone for a bit. Nobody really talked to me, and that's fine with me. I'm not there to socialize. I'm there to work. So I've been DJing for more than 25 years doing this kind of thing. And I've seen all kinds of people, and I'm pretty good at picking up on things without having to be told. I can just watch and see what people are like. So 3 o'clock rolls around, the guests come up in the buses and cars and all the rest of that stuff. I have the background music playing. It's beautiful, beautiful autumn weather. It's like unbelievable. It's mid-20s Celsius, which is, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it was a very warm, sunny day. Just gorgeous. No humidity. Open bar, which usually adds to the level of celebration and joy that people are having. But nobody was really doing anything. People were just kind of walking around, looking at things, shaking hands. There was no laughter. There was nobody at the bar. Even the bartender said to me, he says, "I don't know what's going on." I said, "Yeah, it's an open bar. That's usually people pick up on these things and hop right on it." There was nothing. People would nod at me as they walked by, and I'm like, back to them. Nobody was doing anything. And it was the first time in all these years of doing weddings that I've seen anything like this. So eventually the ceremony happens, and, the bride and the groom left to go do their pictures. And there's usually about at least a 2-hour lull after a ceremony is finished. Well, they have pictures done, and, that other people can do what they need to do. In that time, within 10 minutes, everybody left. They left the vicinity. They left the event. They left the parking lot. They got in their cars and they drove away. And there was 7 people, including myself and the bartender, in the gorgeous, carnival-style white tent out there. 7 of us. Nobody drank anything. Nobody was talking to each other. They were kind of playing around on their phones. So I thought, well, if there's nobody here, I'm going to tear down my gear from outside and go set it up inside. So I did. Got in maybe an hour. I had everything reset up inside, lights up, everything sound checked, ready to go. There was nobody inside except some of the staff doing the last little bit of setup. And I said, "Have you seen anyone today from the wedding party?" They were like, "Yeah, they came in and said hi." And I'm like, "Okay, that's good." It's weird. Nobody was talking to anybody. So eventually they came back. Supper time was 6 o'clock, and they came back. The MC, who was slightly engaging, did his little spiel before the supper service, and supper went off fine. After that, they do the speeches, and the people were like, they'd get up and they would look like they were in some noir movie or something. Nobody had any humorous stories. Nobody spoke with any dynamics or inflection. And they all kept saying things like, we're hoping you have, a pleasant time. And occasionally you would see people, doing a cheers, but there was no real applause. There was no vocalization of celebration. Everything was so deadpanned. I wondered if they were like, I don't know, on serious depressing drugs or something, but they weren't. And it's not like they were um, anti-alcohol, like they don't, they're not super religious or something like that, and they're just that kind of level kind of people. Um, but it's like watching the people lack of interaction. I started thinking, this is like being in an experiment. This is like being in an NPC wedding event. And I was like, oh my God. And it took me till like 8 or 9 o'clock at night before I really started to really connect all these things and not just think that the occasional person I saw was odd. But there was nothing. These people were deadpan. Um, the bride and groom got up to say their speech at the end. And um, they were like, thank you for attending our special day. Reading off of cue cards, both of them. Thank you for attending our special day. We cannot tell you how much it means to us. And I'm like, lighten up. Like, what's going on with these people? This is the very first time in like decades that I'd seen anybody, like a whole room of people, behave like this. It was weird. So following that, I mean, they moved a few tables around and got the dance floor ready. The MC announced the bride and the groom for their first dance. And, they met in the middle of the floor. He gave her a little twirl, and they were there in the standard pose. He was holding her right hand in his left hand and whatever. And they literally just stood there and did this back and forth. I'm like, that's really odd. Like, no kissing, no big hug, no dip, no nothing. I thought, okay, well, all right, that's fine. And then, then they did the parents dance, like the daughter and her the bride and her father, and they literally stood there at arm's length with their arms on each other's shoulders and just kind of wobbled like this. Their feet didn't move. And I'm like, this is really getting weird. Because if you've been to weddings, these are big celebration moments, right? Where people stand around in a big circle and clap and cheer, and the dancer people ham it up a little bit. But I felt like I was in a Matrix party of all of the off-cast characters that didn't get any personality to interact in the game, but I had to somehow watch from the outside as they had their party. And I could have been the boring guy and responded in my music choice, to the way that they were going on, because they didn't really dance. There was a few, some of the younger people danced. A couple of adults did their thing. But people would come up and request, and they'd say, are we allowed to request a song? I'd say, yeah, absolutely. What do you want to hear? And they'd say it. And then I would put it on within 1 or 2 songs, and they would just sit there looking at the dance floor. Like they knew they should do something at that point, but they didn't quite know what it was that they should be doing after they requested a song and I played it. It was so weird. So I guess it was round about maybe 11 or 12, 11:15 actually. People started filing out. By 11:30, the place was empty, save for myself and the bar staff. So I was tearing down, packing up. I thanked everybody for their requests, as I customarily do, congratulated the bride and groom. So I was walking over to the other side of the room, coiling up some speaker cable, and the bride and groom were sitting there, as they were, like deadpan, stone-faced through the whole ceremony, and danced. They didn't do anything. They just sat there and looked. And I offered my hand to the groom and said, congratulations again. It was a great night. Thank you for hiring me. I really appreciate your business. And he stands up to shake my hand while we're doing this. And he looks at me in the face, and he's like, and then he turns to the side and goes, yes, I believe it was a very pleasant evening. And I'm like, The only word anybody had to describe anything during the night that was good was pleasant. They wished the bride and groom a pleasant honeymoon. They wished, the staff, they said, thank you for a very pleasant meal. And it was so bizarre. And it was like, I felt like I was the only alive person there. I don't know. The whole vibe of the event was weird. There was no camaraderie. There was no level of celebration, no hooting and hollering, and there was an open bar all night. Usually those things can go sideways pretty quick. So if it was an open bar, I'm assuming that it wasn't, that they were like the super serious religious kind of folks. I've done weddings like that before, and those people are amazing. At the end of the event, which went from like 8 to 10:30, they danced all night long, all night. And at the end of the event, they all turned to me and were applauding me. They were clapping for the DJ. I was like, wow, that was really cool. So that was a real highlight. But that was a real remarkable gig, that one. But these folks, there was nothing engaging in them. I couldn't talk to them. They couldn't engage with me when they were talking about anything. And I tried to keep things on a good high energy level with a good balance of music that I know works at weddings, given the age of the people that I was there to play for. And only very occasionally did people dance. They literally sat and looked around. I was like, that's weird. So I used to think, when people would say about these NPC people, these non-player characters, that it was one of those weird kind of like insults, to say that you're not a real person if you're not like doing this social media trend or that one, or if you have your own TikTok channel or whatever. No, that's the way of like, sort of demeaning somebody's personality, right? Calling them that. But I really feel like I was in a matrix. I really believe that for, that 11-hour day that I was there from early afternoon till by the time I got out of there around 12:30, I was in a matrix with non-player characters who could barely express themselves or engage in any level of conversation or social interaction. It was weird. It was really weird. So if you've had an NPC experience, let me know, because I would like to hear what other people have done in these situations. I couldn't leave. It's not like I had an option of just packing up my stuff and going home. I was there for the long haul. It was fine. It was fine. Yeah. But it was just really weird. It was the first time I'd ever been immersed in a situation like that, where I couldn't just go, okay, this is weird, and take off. So let me know what you think if you made it this far. I know it's a bit of a story, but it was something else I've never experienced before. Thanks for watching.